They didn't lower their voices. Under the harsh glow of a single security light, an old man stood at the gate as it slammed shut in his face. Phones were already raised. Someone laughed. Someone shouted, "He is not our family." Ousman Jallow didn't argue. He didn't plead. He asked only one question, his voice calm, almost gentle. "May I stay one more night?" No one answered. A woman kicked his worn sandals toward the street like trash. A man turned away in disgust. As Usman stepped back from the gate, a thick sealed envelope slipped from his hand and fell to the ground unopened, ignored. Inside the house, lights burned bright and voices continued as if nothing had happened. Outside, Usman walked on alone. None of them knew that the man they had just driven away carried a truth powerful enough to shatter every debt, every lie, and every name tied to that house. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And if stories of hidden truth, justice, and healing matter to you, stay with us and subscribe. Ousman Jallow had not seen the coastline of his homeland in more than 30 years. The Atlantic stretched before him wide and indifferent, the same blue he remembered, and yet completely changed, just like the city behind it. Sakunda had grown louder, denser, more impatient. Concrete buildings pressed against one another where open land once breathed. Buses coughed smoke. Hawkers shouted prices with the desperation of people who knew tomorrow was never promised. Usman stood at the edge of the street with a single travel bag at his feet. It held 2 shirts, 1 pair of trousers, a worn pair of sandals, and a folded photograph wrapped carefully in cloth. Nothing else. No documents, no cards, no sign of the life he had lived elsewhere, the life that had made his name known in boardrooms across continents. He had chosen this deliberately. A black luxury car idled several blocks away, unseen from where he stood. Its driver, a younger man with sharp eyes and a disciplined posture, waited patiently. He had been instructed not to interfere unless Usman called, and Usman almost never called. Because this return was not about comfort. It was about truth. Usman walked slowly through the market road, blending into the flow of ordinary people. Women balanced baskets of smoked fish on their heads. Children ran barefoot, laughing and arguing in the same breath. A man with a cracked radio sold phone chargers that might or might not work. Life moved forward, heavy but familiar. Every step stirred memory. He remembered leaving this place as a much younger man, angry, wounded, and afraid that staying would destroy him. Back then, his sister Mariama had stood at the doorway of their small family house, holding her belly, begging him not to go. "Just survive," she had whispered. "Even if it is far away. Just survive." He had survived. More than that, he had built something vast, something powerful. Ports, roads, logistics networks that stitched countries together. His name had been printed in financial magazines. Governments had shaken his hand. Universities had invited him to speak. And yet, the one place he had never returned to was this street, because Mariama had died while he was gone. The news had reached him late through a chain of old contacts who barely knew how to find him. By then she had already been buried. Her children, his blood, had grown up believing he had abandoned them. That he had chosen wealth over family. They did not know that for years an anonymous account had paid their school fees, their rent, their hospital bills, quietly, reliably. They did not know because Usman had never wanted gratitude. He had wanted time. Now time had finally caught him. He stopped in front of a low concrete building with a rusted gate, the address he had memorized long before landing. This was where Mariama's children lived now. The family house, smaller than he remembered, older, cracked at the corners like a tired face that had learned to hide pain. Usman did not go in immediately. He watched. He saw Ousman Jallow, first the eldest, broad-shouldered, tense, carrying authority like a weapon. Lamin spoke loudly to a neighbor, his tone sharp defensive as if the world were always challenging him. Usman recognized the posture instantly, fear dressed up as control. Then Alhaji Jallow stepped out, phone pressed to her ear, eyes scanning the street with calculation. She wore confidence carefully, like makeup thick enough to cover doubt. She laughed too easily at something the caller said. Last came Alhaji Jallow, the youngest. He carried a small bag of groceries, head lowered, movements quiet. He noticed Usman standing across the road and paused for a second, just a second, before looking away. That pause struck Usman harder than any insult could have, because it meant something inside that boy still noticed strangers, still felt. Usman exhaled slowly. This was the family he had come back for. Not to announce himself, not to demand love, but to see what time poverty and unresolved grief had turned them into. He crossed the road and approached the gate. Lamin was the first to challenge him. "What do you want?" he asked, suspicion, immediate, voice hard. "We don't buy anything." "I'm not selling," Usman replied. His voice was calm, respectful. "I'm looking for Mariama Jallow's children." Awa's eyes narrowed instantly. Saini froze. "Our mother is dead," Lamin said. "Who are you?" Usman hesitated, not because he lacked an answer, but because he understood the weight of it. "I am her brother," he said finally. "My name is Usman." The silence that followed was not the kind that invited questions. It was the kind that sharpened knives. Lamin laughed short and bitter. "Another one," he said. "We get them every year. People who smell desperation." Awa crossed her arms. "If your family, where have you been all this time?" Usman did not defend himself. He did not list sacrifices or explain absences. "I left," he said simply, "and I never stopped regretting it." That was not enough, but it was the truth. They did not believe him. Not really. Still, after a heated exchange and a whispered argument between the siblings, Lamin made a decision that felt less like mercy and more like control. One night he said, "You sleep in the back room. Tomorrow you leave." Usman nodded. One night was more than he had expected. The back room smelled of dust and old tools. A single mattress lay on the floor. Usman placed his bag beside it and sat down slowly, the ache in his knees reminding him of his age. That night, long after the household settled, Usman remained awake. He took out the photograph. Mariama smiled up at him, younger than he remembered, eyes full of stubborn hope. In her arms was a small child, Lamin perhaps, or Awa, or maybe Saini. "I came back," Usman whispered into the darkness, "even if you don't recognize me." Outside the thin walls, the family talked, laughed, argued, lived. Inside the small room, Usman closed his eyes. This was only the beginning, and he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his chest that before this journey ended, every secret he had buried and every lie they had learned to survive would rise to the surface. Morning arrived without ceremony. The compound woke the way it always did, arguments layered over routine, fatigue disguised as urgency. Awa's voice cut through the air, first sharp and impatient, complaining about water pressure. Lamin followed with instructions no one asked for. Somewhere behind them, Saini moved quietly, sweeping dust from the doorway, as if order might calm what words could not. Usman rose from the thin mattress before anyone noticed him. He folded it neatly, washed his face at the outdoor tap, and waited. He had learned long ago that in households stretched thin by need, the smallest movements were judged. Awa noticed him first. "You're awake already," she said, eyes flicking to his bag as if checking whether he had stolen anything during the night. "I don't sleep long," Usman replied. "May I help with anything?" she scoffed. "Help costs money." Lamin emerged then, phone in hand, his jaw tight. He did not greet Usman. Instead, he spoke loudly into the phone about a missed payment, about a deadline that could not be moved. When he ended the call, he turned irritation already primed. "You," he said to Usman. "Eat and go. We agreed on one night." Usman nodded. "I understand." Saini set a small plate of porridge on the low table. He did not meet Usman's eyes, but he placed the plate closer to him than necessary. That small gesture stayed with Usman longer than the taste of the food. As the morning unfolded, the shape of the household became clearer. It was not just poor. It was strained, pulled tight by expectations and unspoken fear. Lamin carried the burden of being the man of the house like a badge that burned his skin. He spoke of dignity while calculating survival. Awa spoke of ambition while counting what she did not have. Saini spoke least of all, absorbing what fell through the cracks. When a battered pickup truck stopped at the gate, Lamin stiffened. Inside, he muttered to Usman, "Don't make noise." But Usman did not move fast enough to disappear. The man who stepped out of the truck did not ask permission. He wore crisp clothes that announced money without apology. His eyes measured the compound with casual ownership. "Ousman Jallow," he said, smiling without warmth. "We need to talk." Alhaji Soe had a reputation in the area. He lent money when banks refused. He bought land when families grew desperate. He spoke softly while tightening nets. "I told you I need time," Lamin said, trying to steady his voice. "My aunt is still in the hospital, Alhaji." Soe's gaze drifted past him, briefly resting on Usman. "And this one?" he asked. "A visitor," Lamin snapped. "He's leaving." Usman met the man's eyes calmly. "A visitor," Alhaji Soe repeated, amused. "Be careful, Lamin. Visitors can be expensive." He left with a promise that sounded like a threat wrapped in politeness. When the truck drove off, Lamin exploded. "Do you see what you bring?" he shouted at Usman. "Strangers attract trouble." "I did nothing," Usman said gently. "That's the problem," Lamin replied. "You do nothing and expect to stay." Usman did not argue. He picked up a loose hinge on the gate and fixed it without being asked. He repaired a broken stool. He fetched water, small acts, quiet ones. They did not soften Lamin. They irritated Awa. "People like you," she said later, leaning against the doorway. "You think kindness buys belonging." Usman paused. "No, I think kindness tells the truth when words fail." She laughed. "Truth doesn't feed anyone." By midday, Lamin had left to chase another promise of money. Awa dressed carefully and went out, phone already in her hand. Saini remained behind, studying Usman with the curiosity of someone who sensed a hidden current. "You really knew our mother?" Saini asked, finally. Usman's throat tightened. "Very well. She never talked about you," Saini said. Not accusing, just stating. "I asked her not to," Usman replied. "I thought silence would protect you." Saini frowned. "It didn't." That was all he said. Then he picked up his bag and left. Alone again, Usman sat in the shade and listened to the city breathe. He remembered the last day he saw Mariama, how she had pressed a small bracelet into his palm, insisting he keep it for the child she carried. For luck, she had said. He still had it. That afternoon, a woman from the neighboring compound collapsed near the road. People gathered, shouting advice without moving. Usman rose first. He lifted her gently, called for help, and paid for transport to the clinic with the little cash he carried. No one thanked him. They only noticed later that the woman lived. By evening, Lamin returned with bad news and worse anger. Awa followed, face tight with disappointment. Saini slipped in quietly behind them. Dinner was tense. "This is how it starts," Awa said suddenly. "You help here, help there, then people think you own us." "I don't want ownership," Usman said. "I want peace." Lamin laughed harshly. "Peace is for people with options." The words settled heavily. That night, Usman lay awake again, listening. He could feel the walls closing. not physically but emotionally. Suspicion was replacing tolerance. Pride was choosing cruelty before vulnerability could ask for help. And still, he stayed, because he was not here to be welcomed. He was here to learn. And what he was learning frightened him. Not because his family had become unkind, but because they had learned to believe unkindness was necessary. Somewhere beyond the compound, his driver waited. Lawyers waited. Accounts waited. Usman closed his eyes. The test had already begun. By the fourth morning, Usman understood the unspoken rule of the house. Silence was safer than honesty. He moved through the compound like a shadow present useful and deliberately unnoticed. He rose before dawn to fetch water, swept the yard without being asked, and mended small things that had long been ignored. A cracked basin, a loose door latch, the wire holding the outdoor light together. None of it earned gratitude, but it bought him time. Lamin tolerated him the way one tolerates a temporary inconvenience. Awa watched him as though waiting for a mistake she could expose. Saini alone observed without judgment, his curiosity deepening with every quiet act. That morning, Lamin returned early, face tight with something close to panic. "They've given me 7 days," he announced to the room. 7. After that they take the land. Awa stiffened. "That's impossible. The papers, they don't care," Lamin snapped. "Alhaji Soe doesn't care." The name settled heavily between them. Usman paused where he stood, a broom in his hand. "There may be another way," he said carefully. Lamin turned on him instantly. "You don't get to speak on this." "I only meant you mean nothing," Lamin cut in. "You sleep in our store, and now you want to advise us." Usman lowered his gaze. "I apologize." That apology, offered without resistance, unsettled Awa, more than defiance would have. "You see," she said to Lamin later when she thought Usman couldn't hear. "He's patient, too patient. That's how scammers survive." Usman heard every word. In the afternoon, Lamin dragged Saini along to meet a supposed investor. Awa dressed and left for the city center, her heels clicking with determination. The house emptied, leaving Usman alone again. He used the quiet to step into the front room, a space filled with old furniture and newer resentment. On the wall hung a faded family portrait. Mariama sat at the center, younger, smiling, surrounded by children who barely remembered her warmth. Usman reached out his fingers, trembling slightly as they brushed the frame. "You did your best," he whispered. A sound behind him made him turn. Saini stood in the doorway watching. "You weren't supposed to be in here," Saini said softly. "I know," Usman replied. "I'm sorry." Saini hesitated, then stepped closer. "Lamin thinks you're waiting for something." "I am," Usman said. What Usman considered the boy's face, still unguarded enough to ask. "For you to see me." Saini frowned. "I already do." That evening, Lamin returned angry and empty-handed. Awa followed, phone clenched in her fist. "They all want guarantees," she said bitterly. "Money we don't have." Lamin paced the yard. 7 days, he repeated. 7 days and we lose everything. Usman watched him carefully. "Your mother wouldn't want." "Don't speak for her." Lamin roared. "You weren't here." The accusation struck deeper than Lamin intended. Usman closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his voice was steady. "You're right. I wasn't." Silence fell. That night, a storm of a different kind rolled through the compound, not rain, but shouting from the neighboring street. A young man accused of stealing bread was being dragged by a crowd. Phones flashed, voices rose. Before Lamin or Awa could react, Usman stepped forward. "Leave him," he said calmly. The crowd turned, surprised by the interruption. The boy, no more than 16, was shaking. "He's a thief," someone spat. "He's hungry," Usman replied. He reached into his pocket and placed money into the accuser's hand. Not much. Just enough. The crowd dispersed, disappointed. The boy stared at Usman, tears streaking his face. "Thank you," he whispered. Lamin watched from the doorway, his jaw clenched. Later, when the house settled, Lamin confronted him. "You like to play hero," Lamin said. "That makes people watch us." "I don't want attention," Usman said. "I want peace." "Peace doesn't come free," Lamin snapped. "It comes with power." Usman studied him. "And what will you do when power asks for your soul?" Lamin's face darkened. "Get out of my way." The words hung between them, heavy final. That night, Usman felt the shift. Tolerance had turned into hostility. He lay on the mattress listening as Awa whispered to Lamin in the other room. "He's dangerous," she said. "Not because he's poor, because he refuses to beg." "Then he goes," Lamin replied. "Soon." Usman did not sleep. He reached into his bag and took out the small bracelet Mariama had given him all those years ago. He rolled it between his fingers, grounding himself. He could end this now. One phone call, one document, one reveal. The land would be safe. The debts erased. Lamin's authority shattered. Awa's ambition exposed. Saini's future secured. But that was not why he had come. He wanted to know who they were without money to guide their choices, and he was learning. As dawn crept in, Usman sat up, resolve settling in his chest like stone. They would push him further. They would test him harder. And when the truth finally arrived, it would not be gentle. Because the greatest damage had already been done, not by poverty, but by the belief that survival required cruelty. By the 5th day, the house felt smaller, not because its walls had moved, but because the pressure inside it had thickened. Debt sat at the table with them. Fear slept in the corners. Every conversation bent back toward the same problem, circling it, like tired birds that could not land. Lamin barely ate. His phone never left his hand. Each message tightened his shoulders further. Each unanswered call sharpened his temper. Awa moved through the house with a rehearsed confidence that cracked whenever she thought no one was watching. Saini withdrew even more, speaking only when necessary, his eyes tracking the invisible lines of tension pulling his siblings apart. Usman watched it all. He had learned long ago that money problems were rarely about money. They were about dignity, about the slow humiliation of wanting and not having, about the terror of being seen as weak. And this house was drowning in that terror. That morning, Lamin spread documents across the table, like evidence at a trial. "Hospital bills," he said, tapping the first paper. "Mama Fatu's treatment, school fees, rent arrears. And this." He slapped another sheet down Alhaji Soe's interest. Awa leaned over his shoulder. "He's squeezing us on purpose. He knows we're cornered," Lamin replied. Usman cleared his throat softly. "Sometimes men like that expect you to panic." Lamin's head snapped up. "And what would you know about men like that? I've met them," Usman said. "They trade urgency for control." Awa scoffed. "Listen to him." Talking like an advisor. Usman did not respond. He gathered the empty cups and washed them slowly at the tap, giving the siblings space to tear at one another, without his presence adding fuel. Later, when the compound had emptied, Usman slipped out quietly and walked toward the clinic. Mama Fatu lay on a narrow bed, her breathing shallow, her eyes dull with exhaustion. The nurse recognized Usman from before. "She needs another test," the nurse said quietly. "We can't proceed without payment." Usman nodded. He paid in cash using a different name, as he always did. He did not stay long enough to receive thanks. On his way back, he passed the school Saini once attended. Children poured out laughing, chasing one another with a freedom that felt almost painful to watch. He wondered which of Mariama's children had once laughed like that and when that laughter had been replaced by calculation. When he returned to the house, Lamin was waiting. "Where did you go?" Lamin demanded. "To the clinic," Usman replied. "Mama Fatu needed help." Lamin's eyes narrowed. "With what money?" Usman met his gaze. "Some savings." Awa laughed sharply. "Savings from where you don't work." Usman shrugged gently. "I have worked." "Don't insult us," Lamin snapped. "If you have money, show it. If you don't, stop pretending." Usman felt the familiar pull, the urge to end the charade, to put proof on the table and silence the suspicion. He resisted it. "I'm not pretending," he said. "I'm helping where I can." Lamin slammed his hand on the table. "We don't need mysterious help. We need solutions." "Sometimes," Usman said quietly, "help is a solution." Awa turned away in disgust. "You think kindness fixes systems. This isn't a charity story." That afternoon, Alhaji Soe returned. This time he did not come alone. Two men stepped out of the truck behind him, their presence heavy with implication. Alhaji Soe greeted Lamin warmly, ignoring Usman completely. "I've come with an offer," he said, smiling. "A generous one." They sat in the front room. Saini lingered by the doorway listening. Alhaji Soe laid out his terms with practiced ease. He would cover the hospital bills. He would settle the rent. He would give Lamin breathing room. In return, he said, "I take the land, and I make you comfortable elsewhere." Awa's breath caught. "That land is our mother's, Alhaji." Soe smiled thinly. "Your mother is gone." Usman's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Lamin stared at the table. "We need time. Time costs interest," Alhaji Soe replied. "You're out of it." He rose, straightened his jacket, and glanced briefly at Usman. "Be careful who you listen to, Lamin. Not all advisors are harmless." After he left, the house erupted. "We can't sell," Awa insisted. "That's all we have. And what if we lose everything else first?" Lamin shouted back. "What then?" Saini spoke up, his voice shaking but firm. "Mother wouldn't want." "Mother isn't here," Lamin roared. The argument burned itself out, leaving ash in the air. That night, Usman cooked quietly. He served the food without ceremony. No one thanked him. They ate in silence. Later, as Awa scrolled through her phone, she paused on a message. Her eyes flicked to Usman, then back to the screen. "You know," she said slowly, "people are asking questions about you." Usman looked up. What kind of questions? What kind of man comes back after 30 years with no proof and too much patience? She replied, "People think you're waiting for us to break." "I'm waiting for you to decide," Usman said. "Decide who you want to be," he answered. Awa laughed bitterly. "We don't have that luxury." That night Lamin could not sleep. Usman heard him pacing, muttering numbers, cursing fate. At some point the pacing stopped. A few minutes later, Lamin stood in the doorway of the back room. "You think you're better than us," Lamin said quietly. Usman sat up. "No. You walk around calm while we're drowning." Lamin continued. "That's not innocence. That's judgment." Usman held his gaze. "It's grief," Lamin faltered. "For what? For what this family has been forced to become," Usman replied. Lamin's face twisted. "Get out of my head." He left abruptly. Usman lay back down, staring at the ceiling. He had hoped for suspicion, even anger. But what he was facing now was something more. Dangerous desperation dressed as resolve. And desperation, he knew, made people accept deals they would one day regret. Outside the compound, the city moved on, unaware that a quiet war was unfolding inside one small house. A war between fear and truth, between survival and integrity. Usman closed his eyes. The test was no longer about whether they would accept him. It was about whether they would recognize the cost of rejecting themselves. The sixth day began with a rumor. It moved faster than truth ever did, slipping through neighbors' conversations, hopping from phone to phone, growing sharper with each retelling. By mid-morning, Usman could feel it in the way people looked at him when he stepped outside the compound. Curiosity edged with suspicion. Interest flavored by judgment. Awa had been busy. She sat on the low bench near the doorway, phone in hand, scrolling with satisfaction. "You're trending," she said without looking up. Usman paused. "Trending." "A short video," she replied. "Nothing serious, just a warning to the community." She finally raised her eyes to him. "People should know who they let into their homes." The video was simple and cruel. A few seconds of Usman sweeping the yard, a caption layered over it. "Man claims family ties, refuses proof. Be careful." Lamin watched it once, jaw tight. "You did this?" he asked Awa. She shrugged. "I protected us." Saini looked between them. "Protected us? From what?" "From embarrassment," Awa snapped. "From thieves with stories." Usman felt the weight of the accusation settle on his shoulders, heavy but familiar. He had been accused before in boardrooms, in negotiations, in places where trust was currency and power decided truth. This felt smaller, more personal. "I didn't come to steal," he said quietly. "Everyone says that," Awa replied. By noon the whispers had reached the market. Vendors stared openly. A few men laughed when Usman passed. A woman muttered a prayer under her breath, as if to ward him off. Usman kept walking. At the edge of the market, a familiar figure waited Mr. Kwame Mensah. He wore a simple shirt and cap, blending in, but his posture betrayed discipline. When he saw Usman, he smiled with unmistakable respect. Chair Kwame began, then caught himself, as Usman raised a hand. "Not here," Usman said softly. Kwame nodded. "I heard," he said. "The rumors. They were expected," Usman replied. Kwame hesitated. "You don't have to do this." "I do," Usman said. "For myself." Kwame handed him a folded newspaper. Inside was a small notice, an auction listing. "The Jallow land." Date circled in red. "They're moving faster," Kwame warned. Usman folded the paper carefully. "Thank you." As they parted, a passerby stared too long. Usman noticed. The afternoon brought another test. A boy, no more than 12, collapsed near the compound gate, exhausted and shaking. People gathered, phones out, commentary rising before help. Someone recognized Usman. "Isn't that the man from the video?" a voice called. "Yes, the fake uncle." The crowd hesitated, suddenly interested in watching rather than acting. Usman knelt anyway. He checked the boy's pulse, loosened his shirt, asked for water. After a moment's delay, a woman handed him a bottle. The boy revived slowly. "Thank you," the woman whispered, embarrassed. The crowd dispersed, disappointed that nothing dramatic had happened. Lamin had watched from the doorway, his face hard. "You like scenes," he said when Usman returned. "You enjoy attention." "I dislike suffering," Usman replied. Lamin scoffed. "Then suffer somewhere else." That evening, the house felt charged, as if everyone were bracing for an impact they could sense, but not name. Awa paced. "Alhaji." "Soe called again," she said. "He wants an answer tomorrow." "We can't give him one," Saini said. "Selling the land might save us," Lamin cut in. "You think pride pays hospital bills?" Usman listened, silent. "You," Lamin said, suddenly turning to him. "You brought chaos. Now you watch us tear ourselves apart." "I didn't bring the chaos," Usman said. "I walked into it." Awa laughed harshly. "Always poetic, never practical." Saini stood, hands trembling. "What if he's telling the truth?" The room froze. "What truth?" Lamin asked slowly. "That he's family," Saini said. "That he cares." Awa stared at him, as if he'd betrayed them. "Care doesn't hide." Usman met Saini's eyes. "Sometimes it does," he said, "when being seen would destroy what you're trying to protect." Lamin's patience snapped. "Enough." He pointed toward the back room. You stay out of our decisions. You eat our food. You sleep under our roof. That's all you get. Usman nodded. Understood. Later that night, Awa posted again. Another video. This one harsher. The comments filled quickly. Scammer, parasite, kick him out. Usman read none of it. He sat in the back room holding Mariama's bracelet, feeling the quiet ache of watching his family define him without knowing him. Near midnight, Saini came quietly to the door. "They're going to ask you to leave," he whispered. "Soon." Usman looked up. "Are you afraid?" Saini swallowed. "Yes." "Of me?" Usman asked gently. "No," Saini said. "Of what we're becoming." Usman placed the bracelet back in his bag. "Then remember this feeling," he said. "It will matter later." Saini frowned. "Later, when the truth arrives," Usman replied. Outside the city hummed indifferent. Inside the compound lines were being drawn between loyalty and fear, between blood and belief. Usman lay back on the mattress staring at the ceiling. The rumors had done their work. Suspicion had hardened into certainty. Compassion had been framed as manipulation. And Lamine, pressed by debt and pride, was moving closer to a choice that would define him long after money changed hands. Usman closed his eyes. Tomorrow the pressure would increase, and with it, the cost of every word left unspoken. The seventh day arrived carrying the weight of expectation. Everyone in the compound felt it even before Lamine said the words aloud. Decisions could no longer be delayed. Silence was no longer neutral. Something would break either the family or the fragile arrangement that allowed Usman to remain among them. Awa was the first to move. She woke early, dressed with unusual care, and sat in the front room, editing something on her phone. Her fingers moved quickly, confidently. When she finished, she leaned back and exhaled, satisfied. "It's done," she said. Lamine looked up from the table. "What's done? I cleared doubts," Awa replied. "Now everyone knows." She pressed play and slid the phone across the table. The video opened with a still shot of Usman sitting quietly in the yard, head bowed. Then Awa's voice entered, calm, persuasive, edged with warning. "This man came to our home claiming family ties," the narration said. "He refuses to show proof. He pretends humility while hiding his intentions. Be careful who you trust." The comments poured in beneath it. "He's lying. They always come when people are desperate. Kick him out before he steals something." Lamine stared at the screen, conflicted. "You shouldn't have." "I did what you were too afraid to do," Awa cut in. "Now we control the story." Saini stood frozen near the doorway, his face pale. "You didn't ask me." Awa turned sharply. "This isn't a democracy." Usman entered quietly, having heard enough to understand. "You've made me a lesson," he said softly. Awa didn't flinch. "Lessons protect people, or destroy them," Usman replied. She rolled her eyes. "Spare us the drama." The day unfolded under a new tension. Neighbors stopped pretending not to stare. Some whispered openly when Usman passed. Others looked away as if his presence embarrassed them. A few children laughed, repeating words they didn't understand. Usman kept moving. He walked to the edge of the market, where an old woman struggled to lift a sack of rice onto her head. Without hesitation, he helped her. She thanked him, then hesitated. "You're the man from the video," she said uncertainly. "Yes," Usman replied. She studied him, then nodded. "People talk too much, that was all." Later, near the bus stop, Usman noticed a familiar boy sitting on the curb, Bakari, the orphan he had helped days earlier. The boy held his stomach, eyes unfocused. "What's wrong?" Usman asked. "I haven't eaten," Bakari admitted. Usman bought him food, sat beside him, and listened as the boy talked about sleeping behind a closed shop, about being chased away from everywhere. The conversation was quiet, ordinary, and completely ignored by the passers-by who had so eagerly watched humiliation. A man nearby scoffed. You still playing Sant Usman didn't answer. When he returned to the compound, Lamin was waiting, arms crossed. You enjoy embarrassing us, Lamin said. I fed a hungry child, Usman replied. You fed suspicion, Lamin shot back. People think we're hiding something. Usman looked at him steadily. Are you? The question struck harder than accusation. That evening, Saini found Usman sitting alone. They believe her, Saini said quietly. Most of them. Usman nodded. Belief is easier than curiosity. Saini swallowed. I found something today. Usman looked up. What did you find? A box, Saini said. Hidden in the old cupboard. Mother's things. Usman's heart stilled. And there was a letter, Saini continued. It mentioned you. Usman closed his eyes briefly. What did it say? Saini hesitated. That you left to protect her, that you sent money, that you begged her to forgive you. Footsteps approached. Lamin entered the room abruptly. What letter? Saini stiffened. Nothing. Don't lie to me, Lamin snapped. He moved past Saini and opened the cupboard himself, rummaging until he found the box. He read the letter quickly. His face changed not into relief but into something darker. This proves nothing, he said finally. Anyone could write this. It's her handwriting, Saini insisted. Lamin tore the letter in half, then into quarters, then burned it. Usman watched silent as ash fell to the floor. You see, Lamin said harshly, stories are cheap. Saini stared at the ashes, shaking. You're afraid. Lamin turned on him. I'm responsible for what Saini demanded, for destroying the truth. Lamin raised his hand, but stopped himself. Silence fell. That night, Awa posted again. The tone was sharper this time. We will not be manipulated. The comments applauded. Inside the house, the walls felt closer than ever. Usman lay awake, staring into darkness, feeling the familiar ache of watching fear win. He thought of Mariama, of the choices she had made to keep her children fed and schooled, of the lies she had endured, so they wouldn't carry shame. And now, here they were burning her words to survive another day. Near dawn, Lamin stood alone in the yard, phone pressed to his ear. I agree, he said quietly. Tomorrow. Usman heard. He knew who Lamin was speaking to. The decision had been made. When Lamin turned and saw Usman watching, there was no anger left in his face, only resolve. You leave soon, Lamin said flatly. This ends. Usman nodded slowly. It will. But not the way Lamin expected. As the sun rose over the city, casting light on streets that did not care who was honest or who was cruel, Usman felt a deep, steady certainty settle inside him. They had chosen belief over blood, fear over truth, and soon, very soon, they would have to face the cost of that choice. The 8th day began with ashes still clinging to the corners of the room. Saini swept the floor in silence, gathering the fine gray remnants of the letter Lamin had burned the night before. Each stroke of the broom felt heavier than the last. The words were gone, but their meaning refused to disappear. Truth once glimpsed did not vanish easily, even when reduced to dust. Usman watched from the doorway. He had not slept. Not because of fear, but because something inside him had shifted. The test he had come to conduct, quiet, patient, restrained, had reached its midpoint. What he was witnessing was no longer confusion or misunderstanding. It was choice. Lamin emerged late, his face set with determination. He avoided Usman's eyes entirely, moving straight to the table, where the auction notice lay folded and refolded, until the paper had softened. We meet Alhaji Soe today, Lamin announced. We finish this. Awa nodded immediately. Good. The longer this drags, the worse it looks. Saini stiffened. You're really doing this? We don't have alternatives, Lamin replied. Only illusions. His gaze flicked briefly toward Usman, cold, dismissive, including him. Usman felt the words land not as insult but as confirmation. He stepped forward. "Before you go," he said, "there is something you should know." Lamin scoffed. "More stories." "No," Usman replied. "A warning." Awa laughed sharply. "Here we go." Usman looked at Lamin steadily. "Alhaji Soe's papers are not clean. The land transfer he's offering will trap you. Legally." Lamin's jaw tightened. "You don't know that." "I do," Usman said. "And how would a man who sleeps in our store know that Awa challenged?" Usman paused. He could feel the edge of the moment, the thin line between restraint and revelation. He stepped back from it. "You don't have to believe me," he said. "Just check." Lamin shook his head. "We're done listening." They left together. Lamin and Awa, leaving Saini standing alone with Usman. "I'm sorry," Saini said quietly. "I tried." Usman placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Trying matters," he said, "even when it fails." Saini swallowed. "What happens now?" Usman looked toward the street where the city pulsed with ordinary indifference. "Now," he said, "we see who they become." Left alone, Usman sat in the front room and allowed himself to remember. He remembered the day he had left, how the family betrayal had nearly destroyed him, how the opportunity to leave the country had felt like both escape and exile, how Mariama had pressed money into his hand for the journey even when she needed it more. He remembered the early years of struggle abroad, the nights spent sleeping in offices, the deals that failed, the ones that succeeded. He remembered choosing anonymity, even as success grew, choosing distance, because he believed it would protect the people he loved from the shadows that followed wealth. Now watching Lamin choose a dangerous shortcut, Usman felt the old guilt rise again. Had his absence taught them this? By afternoon, Saini returned with troubling news. They signed something, he said breathlessly. Not everything, but enough. Usman closed his eyes. The midpoint had arrived, not marked by revelation, but by damage. That evening, a knock came at the gate. A uniformed man handed Lamin a notice, formal, stamped final. The auction date had been moved forward. Awa stared at the paper. "That's not what he promised." Lamin's face drained of color. "He said we had time." Usman watched as realization crept in. Not relief, not gratitude, but fear, sharpened by betrayal. "That man lied," Awa whispered. Saini looked at Usman. "You said I warned you," Usman replied gently. Lamin rounded on him. "You planned this." Usman shook his head. "No, I tried to stop it." Lamin's voice rose. "You manipulated us. You waited until we were desperate." "I waited until you were honest," Usman said quietly. "With yourselves." Silence followed. It was the most dangerous kind, the kind where anger had nowhere left to hide. Awa broke it first. "Enough. We can't fix this now. He needs to go." Lamin nodded, the decision hardening. "Tonight," Saini protested. "You can't just—" "We can," Lamin snapped. "And we will." Usman listened without interruption. He did not argue. He did not plead. Instead, he went to the back room and opened his bag. He took out the photograph of Mariama, the bracelet, and finally a thick sealed envelope, one he had prepared before ever stepping foot in the compound. He had hoped not to use it yet. But tests, like storms, did not wait for readiness. When Lamin returned to the yard, Usman stood waiting. "I'll leave," Usman said calmly. "As you wish." Awa crossed her arms. "Good. But before I do," Usman continued, "this belongs here." He placed the sealed envelope on the low table. "What is that?" Lamin asked. "Proof," Usman replied. "Not of who I am, but of who you've been." Lamin scoffed. "We don't want it." "You will," Usman said. Soon, night fell quickly. The compound gathered in quiet hostility, neighbors watching, whispers rising. Lamin opened the gate and stepped aside. "Go!" he said. Usman picked up his bag and walked toward the street. At the threshold he paused, not to look back but to speak. "Your mother loved you," he said softly, even when love required silence. No one responded. The gate closed behind him. As Usman walked away, the weight of the midpoint settled fully into place. The test had crossed its center. What came next would not be gentle correction. It would be consequence. Inside the house, Awa sank onto a chair, suddenly unsure. Saini stood frozen, staring at the envelope on the table. Lamin turned away, telling himself he had done what was necessary. Outside, Usman walked alone into the city lights, his expression unreadable. The truth was no longer waiting to be invited in. It was already on its way. Morning arrived without relief. Inside the compound, the air felt stale, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension of the night before. The sealed envelope sat untouched on the table, exactly where Usman had left it. No one had dared to open it, not out of respect but out of fear of what it might confirm. Awa avoided the front room entirely. Lamin paced instead, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent. Every call ended the same way. Promises delayed, excuses, repeated doors quietly closed. The confidence he had worn like armor for years was beginning to crack, revealing something raw beneath it. Saini watched him silently. "Have you called the lawyer?" Saini asked. Lamin snapped. "What lawyer? With what money?" Saini gestured toward the envelope. "Maybe we should know," Lamin cut in sharply. "We're not touching that." Why? Saini pressed. "What are you afraid of?" Lamin stopped pacing. For a moment his anger faltered, replaced by something dangerously close to honesty. "That it will prove I was wrong," he said. "And if I was wrong about him, then I've been wrong about everything." Saini said nothing. He understood more than Lamin realized. By midday, the consequences of Lamin's deal became impossible to ignore. Two men arrived at the gate with clipboards and an authority that did not ask permission. They measured. They took photographs. They spoke in legal language that sounded final. "This is preliminary," one of them said. "But you should prepare for what Awa demanded. For relocation," the man replied flatly. After they left, Awa's composure shattered. "He lied," she whispered. "Alhaji Soe lied to us." Lamin sank onto a chair, head in his hands. "I thought I could control it." Saini walked to the table and placed his hand on the envelope. "I'm opening it," he said. Lamin looked up sharply. "Don't! I'm not asking." Before Lamin could stop him, Saini broke the seal. Inside were documents neatly organized, deliberate. Bank transfers dating back years, hospital payments, school fees, rent receipts, each one tied to their family. Each one signed not with a name but with a simple initial. O.J. Saini's hands trembled as he turned the pages. "He paid for Mama Fatu's treatments," Saini whispered. "For my school, for Awa's exam fees, for everything," Awa finished softly. The room fell silent. Lamin stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. "That's impossible," he muttered. "We would have known." "You didn't want to know," Saini said quietly. Awa sat down slowly, her phone slipping from her hand. All this time, the truth did not arrive with relief. It arrived with shame. At the clinic across town, Mama Fatu's condition worsened. A nurse called the compound, her tone clipped. "We need immediate payment for the next procedure. If it's not settled today." Saini didn't wait for Lamin to respond. He grabbed the envelope and ran. At the clinic, the nurse flipped through the documents, her eyes widening. "These accounts, this is serious money." Saini swallowed. "Is it enough?" The nurse nodded. "More than enough." As arrangements were made, Saini stepped outside and pulled out his phone. He dialed the only number he could think of. Usman answered on the second ring. "I'm at the clinic," Saini said, voice breaking. "They need help. I'm on my way," Usman replied. When Usman arrived, dressed as simply as ever, Saini felt something inside him. Release. "I'm sorry," Saini said immediately. "For everything." Usman shook his head. "You don't owe me an apology." "I should have fought harder," Saini insisted. "You fought enough," Usman said. "Sometimes the fight isn't to win, it's to witness." Inside the clinic, Mama Fatu slept peacefully, unaware of the storm her illness had helped expose. Outside, Saini spoke quickly, guilt spilling out. "They're losing the land. Lamin made a deal." "He thought I know," Usman said. "You knew?" Saini asked. Usman nodded. "Before he did." "Then why didn't you stop him?" Usman looked toward the busy road. "Because some lessons only arrive after the mistake." Back at the compound, Awa sat alone, scrolling through the comments on her videos. The tone had shifted. Questions replaced certainty. Did they really kick him out? Someone says he paid hospital bills. What if we were wrong? Her stomach twisted. She deleted the videos. Too late. When Lamin finally opened the envelope himself, the weight of his decisions crashed down fully. The documents told a story he could no longer deny, a man who had never stopped caring, a brother who had chosen absence over destruction, a wealth that had been used quietly, deliberately. Lamin's phone rang. It was Alhaji Soe. Lamin answered, voice shaking. "You said the deal would protect us." Alhaji Soe laughed softly. "I said many things." "You lied," Lamin said. "You believed," Alhaji Soe replied. "That's not my responsibility." The call ended. Lamin stared at the phone, realization hollowing him out. By evening, the family was fractured in a new way, not by suspicion, but by truth. Saini returned with Usman just as the sun dipped low. Lamin stood when he saw them, pride warring with desperation. "You should have told us," Lamin said, hoarsely. "I tried," Usman replied. Awa covered her face. "We destroyed him," she whispered. "For nothing." Usman looked at her steadily. "Not for nothing," he said. "For fear." The words cut deeper than accusation. Lamin took a step forward, then stopped. "Is it too late?" Usman considered him. "To fix everything?" he asked. "Yes." Lamin flinched, but not to face it. Usman continued. Outside, neighbors gathered, sensing change. Whispers spread again. But this time uncertainty had replaced mockery. Usman turned toward the gate. "I won't stay tonight," he said. "You need to sit with what you've learned." Saini protested. "Where will you go?" "Where I always go," Usman replied. "Forward." As he walked away, Lamin sank to his knees, the full weight of his choices finally crushing through his defenses. The sealed envelope lay open on the table. Now its contents no longer hidden, its truth irreversible. What had been ignored had now been seen, and what was seen could no longer be undone. The 10th day dawned with consequences that no one could outrun. Lamin did not sleep. He sat on the floor all night, back against the wall, the open envelope spread around him, like a map of every wrong turn he had taken. Each document felt heavier than the last. Proof was no longer abstract. It had weight, dates, signatures. It had patience. It had been waiting. By morning, Awa's eyes were swollen from crying. She moved through the house quietly, collecting the remnants of the confidence she had worn so easily just days before. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with messages she no longer wanted to read. Saini stood at the doorway, watching Lamin. "You should eat," Saini said softly. Lamin didn't look up. "I don't deserve to." Saini hesitated. "That won't fix anything." Lamin laughed bitterly. "Nothing fixes this." Outside, the neighborhood buzzed with new energy. People who had laughed at Usman now whispered his name with uncertainty. The same phones that had amplified Awa's accusations were now filled with speculation. Someone had posted photos of the bank transfers. Someone else claimed to know the truth from a cousin's friend. Truth, Lamin realized, did not arrive cleanly. It arrived distorted but powerful enough to shift balance. Late that morning, Alhaji Soe arrived unannounced. He did not bother to knock. He stepped into the compound with the confidence of a man who believed the ground already belonged to him. Two associates lingered near the gate watching. "I assume you've read the fine print by now," he said pleasantly. Lamin stood his legs unsteady. "You moved the auction date." Alhaji Soe shrugged. "Opportunities change. You said I said what you needed to hear," Alhaji Soe interrupted. "That's how business works." Awa stepped forward. "You deceived us." Alhaji Soe smiled. "You deceived yourselves." The words stung because they were true. "I want out," Lamin said hoarsely. Alhaji Soe's smile faded. "There is no out." Saini clenched his fists. "The land was never yours. Everything is mine, once Desperation signs the paper," Alhaji Soe replied coolly. Lamin's chest tightened. "What if I bring the money?" Alhaji Soe laughed openly. "Now from where?" The question echoed painfully through the compound. "From him," Awa said suddenly, her voice barely more than a whisper. All eyes turned toward the empty doorway where Usman should have been. Saini shook his head immediately. "Number," Lamin swallowed. "We have to try." Saini stepped between them. "You already used him. You humiliated him. You threw him out." Lamin's voice broke. "I know, Alhaji." Soe watched with interest. "Ah," he said. "So the old man was real after all." "He is," Lamin replied quietly. Alhaji Soe's eyes narrowed. "Then bring him, or accept the loss." He turned and left, leaving silence in his wake. The decision that followed was heavy, reluctant, and unavoidable. Saini found Usman that afternoon at a small roadside cafe near the port. He sat alone, sipping tea, dressed the same as always, unremarkable, patient. "I knew you'd be here," Saini said, breathless. Usman looked up and smiled faintly. "You always find what you're looking for," he said. Saini sat across from him, shame written across his face. "They're losing the land." "I know," Usman replied. "They want your help," Saini continued quickly. "Lamin, he's broken. Awa too." Usman stirred his tea slowly. "And what do you want?" Saini hesitated. "I want us to stop hurting people who love us." Usman studied him for a long moment. "Then listen carefully," he said. "I will not buy their forgiveness." Saini nodded. "I wouldn't ask that. I will not erase their choices," Usman continued. "Consequences matter. I understand, but I will stop injustice," Usman said. "There's a difference." Saini exhaled shakily. "Will you come back?" Usman finished his tea. "When I'm invited," he said. "As family, not as a solution." Back at the compound, the waiting was unbearable. Awa paced. Lamin sat at the table, staring at the empty chair where Usman had once sat quietly. "Did he agree?" Awa asked when Saini returned. Saini shook his head. "Not like that." Lamin's shoulders sagged. "Then it's over." A knock interrupted him. This one was firm, official. Two uniformed officers stood at the gate with documents in hand. "We're here regarding disputed land titles and fraudulent filings," one said. "You may want legal representation," Awa gasped. Lamin's knees buckled. Across the city, Usman stood in a quiet office overlooking the port. For the first time since his return, he allowed the mask to slip. "Begin," he said calmly into the phone. Within hours, wheels that had waited years began to turn. Banks froze. Accounts, auditors flagged transfers. A lawyer in another city filed an injunction. Evidence moved with the precision of machinery long prepared for this moment. Alhaji Soe's phone rang repeatedly. By nightfall, the neighborhood buzzed again, but this time with something different: fear. Lamin sat alone in the dark, understanding. Finally, that wealth was not what made Usman powerful. It was foresight. Awa stared at her phone as messages flooded in questions, apologies, accusations. She deleted them all. Saini stood at the gate watching the street. He saw a convoy of vehicles pass slowly, black-polished, unmistakable. They did not stop, not yet. The test was reaching its breaking point. And tomorrow, everything that had been hidden money, Lai's intentions would no longer belong to the shadows. The 11th day arrived with sirens in the distance. They weren't close enough to bring comfort, nor far enough to ignore. The sound hovered over the neighborhood, like a warning that something larger than rumor was unfolding. Lamin stood at the gate, long after dawn, staring down the street as if he could will answers to appear. None came. Inside the house, Awa sat rigid on the couch, her phone clutched in both hands. She hadn't slept. Every few minutes she unlocked the screen, scrolled, then locked it again, caught between wanting to know and wanting to hide. Saini moved quietly, making tea. No one drank. "What happens now?" Awa asked finally, her voice thin. Lamin didn't turn. "We wait." For what she pressed. "For judgment," he replied. The word landed heavily. By mid-morning, the first official notice arrived, slid under the gate, stamped and formal. It cited irregularities in the land documents pending investigation and a temporary halt on all transfers. Lamin read it twice, then handed it to Awa without a word. Her hands trembled. "This is serious." "It always was," Saini said. Awa rounded on him. "Don't. I'm not blaming you," Saini replied. "I'm stating facts." Facts were no longer abstract. They were knocking. Another car pulled up outside this one, older, dust-streaked. A woman stepped out, posture straight, eyes alert. She introduced herself as a clerk from the registry office. "We need statements," she said, "and access to your records." Lamin swallowed. "Do we need a lawyer?" She looked at him carefully. "You should already have one." After she left, silence swallowed the house again. Awa covered her face. "We've destroyed everything." "No," Saini said gently. "We revealed it." Lamin laughed hollowly. "That's supposed to make me feel better." Saini shook his head. "It's supposed to make us honest." By afternoon, Lamin could no longer sit still. He left the compound, walking without direction, letting the heat and noise punish him. He passed the market, where people once mocked Usman openly. Now they watched Lamin with a different expression, recognition edged with pity. At a corner stall, Lamin stopped. "Where is the old man?" someone asked quietly. Lamin didn't answer. He found himself at the port, without realizing how he got there. The smell of salt and fuel filled the air. Cargo moved with steady efficiency, cranes lifting workers, calling systems functioning without drama. Order, the opposite of his life. He spotted Usman near the water, speaking with a man in a crisp shirt and an ID badge. Lamin hesitated, then approached slowly. Usman noticed him immediately. "You shouldn't be here," Lamin said, the words tumbling out awkwardly. "Neither should you," Usman replied calmly. Lamin stood there, stripped of authority, pride leaking from every crack. "They're investigating," he said. "Everything. I know." Lamin clenched his fists. "Did you plan this?" Usman studied him. "I planned to stop a crime," he said. "I didn't plan your choices." Lamin's voice shook. "You let us fall." Usman shook his head. "You jumped. The truth hurt because it fit." "I was afraid," Lamin admitted finally. "I didn't want to lose the house, or look weak." Usman nodded. "Fear explains. It doesn't excuse." Lamin's shoulders sagged. "Can you fix it?" Usman considered him carefully. "I can stop injustice," he said. "I can't undo humiliation." Lamin flinched. "I don't need forgiveness," he said quickly. "I need help." Usman's gaze sharpened. "Those are not the same thing." Lamin swallowed. "Then tell me what to do." Usman gestured toward the port. "Stand still," he said, "and tell the truth when asked." "That's it, that's everything." Lamin nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of it. When he returned home, Awa was on the floor, surrounded by papers. "They're saying Alhaji Soe is under investigation," she said breathlessly. "Fraud, forgery, other families." Saini looked up. "Then it wasn't just us." "No," Lamin said quietly. "It never was." Evening fell, and with it came the gathering. Neighbors drifted closer, sensing resolution. Some whispered apologies, others kept their distance. The same phones that once recorded humiliation now hovered uncertainly, unsure what story they were meant to tell. Awa stepped outside for the first time in hours. "I was wrong," she said to no one in particular. "I wanted control." No one replied, but someone nodded. As darkness deepened, a convoy passed the street again, slower this time, not stopping. Yet, Saini stood at the gate, watching. "He's coming," he said softly. Lemon felt his chest tighten. "To punish us," Saini shook his head. "To end the lie." That night, Lemon dreamed of fire and paper letters, burning signatures, dissolving faces he could no longer recognize. He woke before dawn, sweating the taste of regret, sharp in his mouth. For the first time in years, he prayed not for rescue, but for clarity. Outside the city prepared for another day. Inside the house, the family waited, no longer fighting the truth, but bracing for it. And somewhere beyond the gate, Ousman Jallow prepared to step back into their lives, not as a secret, not as a savior, but as the final witness to what they had chosen to become. The 12th day opened with a summons. It came not by phone, but by message, passed hand to hand, quiet, deliberate, unavoidable. The elders wanted a meeting, not later, not privately, now, in this neighborhood that mattered. Lamin stood in the center of the front room, holding the note, his fingers numb. Awa paced again, the habit returning like a reflex. Saini sat still, as if movement itself might tilt the balance. "They want everyone present," Lamin said. "Family, witnesses." Awa swallowed. "They know. They always know," Saini replied. By mid-morning, chairs had been arranged in the open space near the compound gate. Men and women of different ages gathered, their faces set in the careful neutrality of people preparing to judge. Phones hovered at the edges, not raised high, but ready. Lamin stepped forward, heart pounding. Usman arrived quietly, alone, dressed no differently than before. There was no convoy, no display, only the calm of a man who had stopped running from outcomes. The elders nodded to him, some with respect they did not yet name. "This meeting," the oldest among them began, "is about truth." The word rippled through the crowd. "Claims have been made." The elder continued. "Accusations, evidence, and harm." Awa's throat tightened. She glanced at Usman, then looked away. Lamin cleared his throat. "I accept responsibility for what I signed." Murmurs spread, but Lamin added, "I did not know I was being deceived." Usman spoke then, his voice steady but unraised. "Ignorance explains risk," he said. "It does not erase damage." The elder raised a hand. "We will hear all sides." Awa stepped forward abruptly. "I made the videos," she said, her voice shaking. "I wanted to protect my family." "I didn't think you thought," Usman said gently. "You just chose fear." The words stung because they were true. Saini took a breath and spoke next. "Our mother wrote a letter," he said. "It was destroyed, but its meaning wasn't." He explained what the letter had said about sacrifice, about silence, chosen to shield children from the cost of ambition and betrayal. As he spoke, faces in the crowd softened. Some nodded, others lowered their eyes. The elder turned to Usman. "You refused to show proof when asked." Usman nodded. "I did. Why? Because love that requires receipts is already broken," Usman replied. I wanted to see who they were without my money. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. That is a test, someone muttered. Yes, Usman agreed. It was. The elder studied him carefully. And what did you learn? Usman looked at Lamin, at Awa, at Saini. That fear teaches people to trade dignity for speed, he said, and that silence, when misunderstood, becomes a weapon. The elder sighed. This has gone far. Then another voice entered, cool, precise. A lawyer stepped forward from the edge of the gathering, credentials displayed openly. With permission, she said, I'd like to clarify the legal matter. The elder nodded. The documents signed by Ousman Jallow were obtained under false representation. The lawyer continued. The filings by Alhaji Soe include forged signatures and backdated approvals. An injunction has been placed. The auction is suspended. The crowd exhaled as one, but the lawyer added this does not erase the harm done within this family. Silence returned heavier than before. The elder turned back to Lamin. You led this house. Lamin bowed his head. I failed it. And you, the elder, asked Awa. Awa's voice broke. I traded truth for control. The elder nodded once. And you, he said to Usman, hid power among the powerless. Usman did not flinch. I did, he said, and I accept the consequences of that choice. The elder leaned back, considering. Then here, this, he said. Money will not heal what pride has wounded. Usman inclined his head. I agree. The meeting ended without applause, without celebration. Only a quiet acknowledgement that something old had cracked and something fragile had begun. As people dispersed, phones finally lowered. A woman approached Usman. You could have crushed them, she said softly. Usman looked toward the gate. Crushing isn't justice, he replied. It's delay. Lamin stood alone as the crowd thinned. When Usman passed him, Lamin spoke barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. Usman stopped. He did not turn immediately. Sorry is the beginning, he said, not the end. Night fell with a strange calm. Inside the compound, Awa deleted her remaining posts one by one. Saini sat with Mama Fatu at the clinic, holding her hand as she slept. Lamin walked the yard, counting cracks in the concrete, grounding himself in something real. Usman did not stay. He walked back toward the port where the water reflected lights that never asked permission to shine. The test had narrowed to its final edge. What remained was not revelation, but reckoning, and it would arrive soon. The 13th night fell heavier than the ones before it. Not with noise, not with chaos, but with the kind of silence that pressed against the ears until every breath sounded like confession. Inside the compound, the house felt hollowed out. The elders' meeting had ended hours ago, yet its weight lingered in every corner. No one spoke. No one turned on the radio. Even the neighbors who once hovered with curiosity now kept their distance, as if sensing that what remained was not spectacle, but consequence. Lamin sat alone at the table, staring at the surface where Usman's sealed envelope had once rested. The papers were gone now, taken by lawyers, copied, catalogued. Yet he could still see them in his mind. Dates, amounts, proof of care that had stretched across decades. Care he had rejected. Awa lay on her bed facing the wall phone, dark beside her. For the first time in years, she felt invisible, and it terrified her. She had always controlled the story. Now the story had moved beyond her reach. Saini stood at the doorway watching the gate. He didn't know what he was waiting for, only that something unfinished hovered just beyond it. As the hour grew late, Lamin finally spoke. He's not coming back, he said, voice flat. Awa didn't turn. Why would he? Saini answered instead. Because this isn't finished. Lamin laughed bitterly. Finished. We signed our future away. We humiliated the one person who protected us. What ending are you expecting? Saini swallowed. One that makes sense. Lamin shook his head. Sense is a luxury. Outside footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. Saini's heart jumped. He moved closer to the gate just as a shadow crossed under the security light. Ousman Jallow stood there. No convoy, no announcement. Just the same small travel bag at his side. Lamin froze. Awa sat up abruptly. Saini opened the gate without being told. Usman stepped inside, his expression unreadable. "I said I wouldn't stay," he said quietly. "I didn't say I wouldn't return." Lamin stood slowly, shame flushing his face. "Why are you here?" Usman looked at him steadily. "Because tonight matters." Awa crossed her arms, defensive reflex returning. "To say what you've already won." Usman shook his head. "This isn't about winning." Then what? Lamin demanded, frustration cracking his voice. "What do you want from us?" Usman set his bag down. "I want you to look at me," he said. They did. "I hid my wealth because money changes behavior." Usman continued. "It turns fear into performance, love into transaction. I needed to know whether blood still meant something without it." Lamin's jaw tightened. "And your answer?" Usman met his eyes. "Blood meant something to one of you." Saini felt his throat close. Usman turned to him. "You stood when it cost you." Saini shook his head. "I didn't do enough. You did what you could," Usman replied. "That matters." Awa scoffed weakly. "So he passes, we fail." Usman faced her. "You protected control, not family." The words landed softly, but they shattered. Awa's shoulders sagged. "I didn't know how else to survive." Usman nodded. "That's what fear teaches." Silence stretched. Lamin stepped forward, voice trembling. "I burned her letter." Usman's eyes flickered, not with anger but grief. "I know," he said. "I sold our land." Lamin continued. "I trusted the wrong man." "I know. I threw you out," Lamin whispered. "Like you were nothing." Usman inhaled slowly. "That," he said, "is the part you must sit with." Lamin bowed his head. "I'm not asking you to forgive me." Usman studied him. "Good." Awa looked up sharply. "Then why are you here?" Usman reached into his bag and withdrew a single document. "This," he said, placing it on the table, "is a temporary injunction. It stops the sale until morning." Lamin's breath caught. "You can still save it." "Yes," Usman replied. "I can." Hope surged and then stopped. "But I won't decide tonight," Usman added. Awa stared. "Why?" "Because tomorrow," Usman said, "you will choose who stands beside me when the truth becomes public." Saini frowned. "Public?" Usman nodded. "There will be a reckoning. For Alhaji Soe, for the forged papers, and for what was done in this house." Lamin's voice shook. "People will talk." "They already are," Usman said. "Tomorrow they'll learn." Awa's eyes filled with fear. "You'll expose us." "I will expose the truth," Usman corrected. "What you do with it is your choice." Silence returned thick-heavy. Finally, Lamin asked the question that had been burning in him since the gate slammed shut days ago. "Do you still consider us family?" Usman did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was steady. "Family is not proven by DNA," he said. "It's proven by what you do when power arrives." Awa wiped her face. "And if we fail again?" Usman picked up his bag. "Then you'll live with honesty, not comfort." He turned toward the door. Saini stepped forward. "Where will you go?" Usman paused. "Where I've always gone when things are unclear," he said. "Away." The gate closed softly behind him. Inside the compound, no one moved. Awa sat back down slowly, her confidence finally stripped bare. Lamin sank into the chair, hands shaking. Saini remained standing, staring at the document on the table, the thin line between loss and restoration. Outside, Usman walked into the night, knowing this was the final bend before truth revealed itself fully. Tomorrow would not be quiet. Tomorrow would not be kind. But tomorrow would be honest. Morning arrived with engines. Not one, not two. A line of them, low, steady, unmistakable, rolled into the street just after sunrise. The sound cut through the neighborhood like a blade. Curtains shifted. Doors opened. Phones rose without instruction. A convoy stopped in front of the Jallow compound. Black vehicles, polished, purposeful. Lamin stood frozen at the doorway, heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Awa grabbed his arm nails, digging in. Saini stepped forward instinctively, as if his body understood before his mind did. The first door opened, then another. Men and women stepped out, lawyers in tailored suits, auditors carrying files, a banker with a calm, watchful gaze. At their center walked Ousman Jallow. He looked the same as always. Simple shirt, worn shoes, small travel bag in hand. But the street did not see him the same way. Whispers exploded. That's him, the old man. No way. Usman stopped at the gate. He did not knock. Lamin opened it with shaking hands. Inside the compound, chairs were pulled out again. Not by elders this time, but by professionals who did not raise their voices because they did not need to. A woman stepped forward, credentials visible. "We're here to address multiple cases of fraud, coercion, and forged land transfers involving Alhaji Soe." The name hit the crowd like thunder. Another man opened a file. "We also confirm the identity of Mr. Ousman Jallow." He paused deliberately. "Founder and principal shareholder of Westbridge Logistics and Infrastructure Group. Operations across 4 countries. Declared assets exceeding," Stop, Usman said calmly. The man nodded and stepped back. Silence swallowed the street. Awa's knees buckled. She grabbed the chair behind her, breath coming in short bursts. Lamin stared at Usman, as if seeing him for the first time and the last. Saini felt tears rise, not from shock, but from the crushing clarity of it all. Usman turned to Lamin. "You asked once why I was calm," he said. "This is why." He gestured slightly. The banker stepped forward. "Every payment made on behalf of this family over the last 27 years, she said evenly, came from Mr. Jallow. Quietly, legally, documented." She placed copies on the table. Hospital bills, school fees, rent, emergency funds. The weight of them bowed Lamin's head. Another lawyer spoke. "The documents signed under Alhaji Soe were fraudulent. We have evidence of forged approvals and coercion. Authorities are en route." As if summoned by the words, sirens sounded closer now. A black pickup screeched to a stop at the edge of the crowd. Alhaji Soe stepped out face tight with fury until he saw the convoy, until he saw Usman. Recognition flickered, then fear. "You Alhaji Soe," spat. "You planned this." Usman met his gaze without heat. "You planned it." "First," he said, "I only stopped you. Officers moved in. Papers were read. Hands were placed on wrists." Alhaji Soe shouted, threatened, denied. No one listened. As he was led away, his eyes found Lamin's. "You would have been rich," he sneered, "if you weren't so weak." Lamin said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. When the street finally exhaled, Usman turned back to his family. "This," he said quietly, "is the truth you didn't want." Awa collapsed into the chair, sobbing openly now. "We destroyed you," she cried. "We humiliated you." Usman shook his head. "You revealed yourselves." He looked at Lamin. "And you," he said, "must decide what you do with that." Lamin stepped forward, his voice cracked. "I thought being strong meant never bending," he said. "I thought fear was weakness. I was wrong." He dropped to his knees. "Not dramatically, not for cameras. I don't deserve forgiveness," Lamin said, "but I will spend my life trying to earn honesty." The crowd held its breath. Usman did not rush to lift him. He let the moment stand. Then he spoke. The land, Usman said, will be placed in a family trust. No single person will own it. No one will sell it in fear. Lamin nodded, tears falling freely. The debts Usman continued are cleared. Legally, transparently. Awa looked up, hope breaking through shame. But hear me, Usman said, his voice firm now. This is not rescue. This is responsibility. He turned to Awa. You will face the community. You will say what you did, and you will accept what follows. She swallowed. I will. He turned to Lamin. You will step back from control. Leadership without accountability destroys families. Lamin bowed his head. I understand. Finally, Usman looked at Saini. You, he said softer now, will study, and when you return you will help build something better than what fear created. Saini nodded through tears. I will. The professionals began to pack up. Engines restarted. Phones lowered slowly, this time reverently. As the convoy prepared to leave, Lamin looked at Usman with one last question in his eyes. Will you stay? Usman considered the house, the street, the faces. I will visit, he said, but I will not live where fear once ruled. He turned away. But this time the gate did not close behind him. The street watched as Usman walked back toward the waiting vehicles, not in triumph, not in anger, but in quiet completion. Justice had arrived, not as revenge, but as truth finally allowed to speak. The street did not return to normal after the convoy left. It couldn't. Something had shifted quietly, permanently. The kind of shift that didn't announce itself with celebration, but with a slow recalibration of how people looked at one another. Neighbors who once laughed now spoke in lowered tones. Those who had recorded humiliation deleted videos without comment. A few knocked on the Jallow gate carrying awkward apologies they didn't know how to deliver. Inside the compound, the house felt unfamiliar, not because it had changed, but because the lies that once filled it were gone. Lamin woke early the next morning and sat alone in the yard. The chair felt heavier than it ever had. Leadership stripped of fear and ego was no longer a weapon. It was work. Iwa emerged quietly, her eyes swollen but clear. She carried a notebook, not her phone. She had written all night names, dates, words she planned to say to the community. I'm going to the market, she said to Lamin. I'll speak there. Lamin nodded. I'll come. No, Awa said gently. This part is mine. She walked out alone. At the market she stood without elevation, without performance. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. I lied, she said. I hurt someone who never stopped protecting us. I used fear to control a story that wasn't mine to tell. People listened. Some turned away. Some stayed. She accepted both. Back at the compound, Saini returned from the clinic with good news. Mama Fatu would recover fully. The trust Usman had established covered her care without spectacle or dependency. Saini sat beside her bed and held her hand, realizing for the first time that help didn't have to humiliate to be real. That afternoon, Lamin met with the lawyers again, not to plead but to listen. The family trust was explained carefully. Boundaries drawn, safeguards installed, no shortcuts, no silent control. When the meeting ended, Lamin signed not out of panic but out of responsibility. As evening fell, Usman returned once more, not with vehicles, not with files, just himself. He stood at the gate, waiting. Lamin opened it immediately. Inside, the family gathered, not in expectation but in readiness. There were no speeches prepared, no rehearsed apologies, only the truth they had practiced all day. Lamin spoke first. I won't ask you to stay, he said. I'll ask you to witness. Usman nodded. That's enough. Awa stepped forward. I don't want your money, she said. I want your patience. Usman studied her. Patience is earned, he replied. You've begun. Saini stood last. I want to learn, he said. Not how to be powerful, how to be right. Usman smiled just slightly. That, he said, is the better ambition. They sat together as dusk settled. No one rushed the silence. It was different now, no longer threatening. It was space. Usman reached into his bag and removed the bracelet Mariama had given him all those years ago. He placed it on the table. "She wanted one of you to have this," he said. "I didn't know who." Lamin shook his head. "Not me." Awa hesitated, then pushed it gently toward Saini. Saini accepted it with trembling hands. Usman watched, eyes bright with something like peace. Later, as night deepened, Usman rose to leave. "I'll return when invited," he said. "Not as a test, as family." Lamin walked him to the gate. "Thank you," he said quietly. Usman stopped. "For what?" "For not crushing us," Lamin replied. Usman considered that. "Crushing teaches nothing," he said. "Facing truth does." He stepped into the street and disappeared into the night. Not in exile, not in triumph, but in completion. Inside the compound, the family sat together. No one reached for a phone. No one spoke for a long while. And for the first time since Mariama's death, the house felt honest. Sometimes the greatest test of family isn't blood, it's power. Poverty can teach people to harden their hearts. Fear can teach them to confuse control with strength. And silence, when misunderstood, can look like abandonment. But the truth is, this real love does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it protects from the shadows, paying costs no one sees, waiting for hearts to choose honesty over convenience. Ousman Jallow did not hide his wealth to punish his family. He hid it to learn who they would be without it, and what he learned changed all of them, not through revenge, but through accountability. Healing is not the absence of consequences. It is the courage to face them. Justice is not humiliation. It is truth allowed to stand. If this story moved, you share what part stayed with you the most. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And if you believe stories of truth, healing, and quiet courage deserve to be told, like, share, and subscribe to stay with us. Because sometimes the richest inheritance isn't money, it's honesty.